Hello, and welcome to segment 4 in our interview series with Connor Vanecek. Continuing to our path in learning about the Baha'i Faith. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. So, my understanding is that today we're going to get into the somewhat supernatural part, the claims of fulfilled prophecy that relate to the Baha'i Faith.
Right. And the main focus for today being because seeing this in a few videos on the Talk Heathen and a few episodes Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience, where when someone calls in about this, the main question is do you have any quantifiable evidence
of prophecy
to at least link it? And so those are kind of the ones to generally focus on for today. Mm-hmm. And if we feel like going into the less specific, quantifiable ones later on, then we can.
Okay. Well, I think maybe not in this segment because we wanted to start with the more quantifiable ones, but I think it provides a fuller tapestry of the Baha'i Faith to cover all of the prophecies. Mm-hmm. So you said you wanted to cover, I think you said 3 main topics rather than 3 main prophecies that you feel have quantitative evidence.
The 3 main topics is because there are multiple ones, or it's multiple ones across multiple religions that complement each other with specifics. Okay,
and so the Baha'i Faith has a view of those that is unique to the Baha'i Faith, or presumably they're not saying Jesus fulfills the prophecies in Daniel, or various claims that Christianity has made for fulfilled prophecy.
Right, and we'll also go into how there are parts of prophecies where Jesus doesn't fulfill it.
Okay. Well, why don't you get us started with the first sort of...
Well, I would actually like, before going into that, we actually do have some guidance from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, essentially we can call them 4 steps, how to go about interpreting this stuff.
Okay.
All right. So he is commenting on passages from Revelations in his book, Gems of Divine Mysteries. Mm-hmm. So now the first one is, how could these words be literally interpreted? Were anyone to appear with all these signs, he would assuredly not be human. And how could any soul seek his company? I think I skipped over a part.
Okay. So is this the prophecy, or is this guidance about interpreting prophecies?
It is guidance, but we should also... Okay, here it is. I kind of buzzed past it. So This is the part of Revelations where he was originally commenting on. So he saith...
Sorry to interrupt again. When you say Revelations, do you mean...
The book of Revelations.
The book of Revelations found in the Bible. Okay, all right.
All right, so he saith, his eyes were as a flame of fire, and brass-like were his feet, and out of his mouth goeth a 2-edged sword. How could these words be literally interpreted? Were anyone to appear with all these signs, he would assuredly not be human, and how could any soul seek his company? Nay, should he appear in one city, even the inhabitants of the next would flee from him, nor would any soul dare approach him. Yet, shouldest thou reflect upon these statements, thou wouldest find them to be of such surpassing eloquence and clarity as to mark the loftiest heights of utterance and the epitome of wisdom. Methinks it is from them that the suns of eloquence have appeared, and the stars of clarity have dawned forth and shone resplendent. So that's just the background of what he's commenting on here at the moment. And going on further in this short article from and this is on we mentioned it once in the first segment that we did for this interview series, BahaiTeachings.org. Mm-hmm. There is it's a series about, what's the name of the series again? It's the Figuring Out Prophecy series.
Okay.
Written by Christopher Buck. His little bio, I think it said that he's a religious studies professor, that's his career.
Professor, okay.
And this one, it's a 50-plus part series.
Okay.
But it's short articles, so.
That's very interesting to me. So is he also Baha'i? Or?
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right.
Also Baha'i.
So I was going to say BahaiTeachings.org, because outsourced. No. Okay. So he's religious studies in Baha'i and talking about, he has a 50-part series. We won't have a 50-part series, but
it's ongoing at the moment.
Oh, well, okay. Are there, because you've talked about ongoing progressive revelation.
It's just like whenever he puts up an update, like a new article to add to it.
Okay, that's good. The thing that I was getting to is, are there new prophecies being made?
No.
Okay.
Because an important thing to remember is for the Baha'i faith, it is viewed in the teaching as we have left the age of prophecy and that we are now in the age of fulfillment ever since the declaration of the Bab in 1844.
Okay. And the declaration of the Bab is the beginning of the Bab's ministry?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so let's get into it. What's the sort of first meaty thing? Because it sounds like what he said is, here's this thing from Revelation. It can't be interpreted literally.
Right, and that is actually step one, where there's just some things where you can't take it as a literal interpretation because it just can't physically happen, and it actually sounds horrendous. Yeah. Like, how would anyone want to be anywhere near that?
Okay. That's refreshing to hear from a religious source. I mean, I'm born and raised in America. I do other shows for the ACA as well. That the ones that get callers, we tend to get callers certainly from the main Abrahamic faiths more than anything else. So, no, it's literal, and you might think it's horrendous, but it's not. Tends to be a common tone, but that isn't the tone of the Baha'i faith, which is why I'm this interested in, like, okay, are there specific prophecies of the Baha'i faith?
No, the Baha'i faith doesn't have its own prophecies.
Okay. It interprets other stuff.
Right, because the age of prophecy is over, and now the age of fulfillment has begun.
Okay, cool.
So that's also why we don't call the Bab and Baha'u'llah prophets. It's mostly used as a shorthand for people who aren't familiar because they understand that term better. But between us who Baha'is that understand it, we usually just refer to them as manifestations of God. Okay, as in just the messengers who were sent.
So they are still delivering a message of God. Right.
And so that's also like an answer for when if a Muslim asks you about Muhammad being the seal of the prophets, like, we don't view our guys as prophets. Yeah. And also another thing to clarify, like, it's a series of letters that Baha'u'llah wrote to various monarchs and even the Pope of the time, and even to I think it was Summons of the Lords of Hosts. Is a compilation of those works, and the way it's worded, some people might accidentally interpret that as being prophetic, and it wasn't until so for some Baha'is, there's this belief, like in the letter that was written to the Kaiser of Germany, that Baha'u'llah predicted World War I and World War II but then it's like doing further research into this because it just, and so in a forum on this, someone started asking the questions like, well, here's the historical context around, like it said, like people of the Rhine, and like it was, the Rhine is historically French and German nations, like that's just a historical wartime wartime area. And so for it to be a prophecy, like it kind of like falls short. But when ignoring that possibility and a fresher look at it, the way Baha'u'llah writes these letters to the various rulers, it's more like he is being predictive of what will happen if they don't treat their citizens and subjects properly, rather than prophecy saying this will happen anyway. It's more like, it's more like if you keep doing this, then this is probably going to happen to you. Okay.
So for clarity, was it ever made clear by Baha'u'llah what he was talking about? Like he was sort of making a, not prophecy, but prediction for the future, right? Like, so for example, I can make the prediction, if the United States launched a nuclear attack, that would start a nuclear war, right? That's not a prophecy because I mean, in part because I'm saying if at the beginning, and because that's very obvious dominoes to see, and hopefully not something that happens. But was it sort of like that?
Yeah, more along that lines of like laying out like a cause and effect situation.
Yeah, because it seems like I'm going to write a letter to, you said it was to the Kaiser.
This one in particular, he also wrote to the Queen of England, the Tsar, the Pope, to various monarchs who basically, this was the age of imperialism and they ruled the whole world.
Yeah, because it seems sort of like if you were going to announce a prophecy, you wouldn't write it in a letter to a ruler about it. You would like announce it to the world. If that was, I mean, maybe not. Maybe, like, did he ever, because he said, right, in the faith that we're in the age of fulfillment, there aren't prophecies.
Right.
So how is that statement square with Baha'i that would say, no, that is a prophecy?
Well, I think it's a misunderstanding.
Okay.
So,
I mean, it seems that way to me. That or I've completely misunderstood all the sentences you've said.
Right.
But,
so there are going to be people who like they interpret it or they have their own personal understanding, but with the understanding that the age of prophecy is over, it lends credence to that it's more predictive rather than prophetic.
Okay. Okay. It's also, I haven't read it, but presumably it's more specific than some of the things that get passed as prophecy. So you've addressed that, and at least it's your opinion, and presumably the statement of the Universal House of Justice.
I'm not familiar on their personal statement.
Okay.
Like there are times when to answer a question, they'll just like present the original material.
Okay.
And
okay. Well, that seems to be less clarifying, but
well, like they'll like in a letter they'll like provide like here's where in the writings you can find guidance, like if it's specific enough for the case that they're addressing.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, so I guess that sort of addresses something that people call a prophecy for that. Is that the first sort of principle that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, that was one thing to bring up, like to just give context around all this.
Okay.
And okay, so we've already mentioned BahaiTeachings.org, but probably one that is. So there's this book that was written, I think, in the 60s or the 70s by a William Sears. He was a Baha'i during his lifetime, and he wrote a book called "The Thief in the Night." And you can go.
Okay.
I downloaded it to my phone a couple of years ago for free from the Baha'i Online Library. So if anyone would like to check it out, I mean, I'm assuming it's still free for download.
Yeah. And it is explicitly a reference to the Bible.
Oh no,
presumably.
The Bible. It talks about prophecies and how they are fulfilled with the. Well, first it has like I think 3 main parts where it goes over. Here are the prophecies from the Christian, Jewish, and Islamic faith traditions.
Okay,
and then like the second part is like looking into the evidence. Like, well, how would they? It's much easier to go into the book because it is so heavily detailed. When I was reading, I was thinking, wow, he could have only used a third of this and I would be convinced.
Yeah.
And it's,
how thick is it? If you don't mind me asking.
I mean, I had a digital copy, so.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. I guess it's harder to remember, you're on page whatever of whatever when you're reading it on a digital copy.
And it's not like till like I think the third part of the book where he starts like going to how like the Baha'i faith like fulfills the various stuff he talked about.
Well, I think that's pretty interesting. And so you wanted to talk about that because
I wanted to bring it up as like if anyone wants to look at this further, that's another source or another source that is recognized by the faith as like a valid source.
Yeah. So actually, here's a quick side note that hopefully won't lead us to a rabbit hole, but probably will. When you say it's recognized by the faith, you just mean sort of like generally?
Yeah, generally.
So there isn't like an official universal house of justice comment on it, or?
Well, the thing with he actually had an important position in a group of individuals known as Hands of the Cause. And they were basically, it was only, okay, so going back, only the guardian of the faith, the last one being Shoghi Effendi, could declare someone a hand of the cause, so like basically an important person in the faith who only responded to the guardian in particular to spread the message across the world or wherever they were needed, whatever they would need to do. And, well, ever since he died, there haven't been any more Hands of the Cause. So he is and the Hands of the Cause, were the interim between, the guardianship and the implementation of the Universal House of Justice.
Okay. So let me see if I can get the sort of, even without dates, timeline here correct. So you had, oh God, I always forget the successor's name.
Okay. So we got the Bab, Baha'u'llah, Abdul-Baha.
Abdul-Baha, and then you had the guardianship.
Well, the guardianship kind of started with Abdul-Baha.
Okay.
And then he declared Shoghi Effendi, his grandson, to be his successor.
Be his successor in like a Hands of the
Well, the Hands of the Cause is a position given by the guardian.
Okay. So it's a specific position, or it's like a recognition of a person's status? Is it like, okay, so I don't know how familiar you are with European royal titles, but let me see. Is it like you are a knight, or is it like you are the Lord of Sussex?
No, it's more like I'm not sure because it's been it's been a long time. All the last Hands of the Cause, I think that's
a different segment anyway. So like I said, big rabbit hole. I did not avoid, but in terms of the prophecy, you're saying so in the move from the Hands of the Cause to
not prophecy. It's just like you were asking, like the book he wrote, like was, I don't know if it's officially recognized by the religion, but in terms of like the Universal House of Justice recognizing it, that was more like backstory on where William Sears fits into the faith.
Like considered that, right? Like Christian apologists and the books they write are not considered scripture, but there's many Christians that like them and like those and go, yeah, Lee Strobel is great.
His book isn't Baha'i scripture, but he uses scripture from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam in the book.
Okay.
And there's a interpretation on how it applies with the Baha'i faith.
Okay. Neat. Cool. So did you want to touch on some of the main themes that he explained, or did you just general?
Oh, no, he had so much stuff. It's like we would not have enough time to go into all of that.
We need a separate segment for a book review for A Thief in the Night.
It was just, like I said, just for the audience, like anyone who wants to look into it themselves.
Look into it, brother.
Thief in the Night by William Sears.
William Sears, okay. I mean, I'm going to look at it, but I read everything, or try to, with my copious amounts of free time that I don't have. But so what was the next sort of
all right, so we just went
idea
over,
you wanted to talk about?
All right, so going back to we can say 4 steps on how to interpret and understand how to understand prophecies. So we already went over step 1. Not everything has to be a literal interpretation if it's not physically possible. And now on here it says step 2, ask us to determine the nature of the figure of speech itself. And then the quote from Baha'u'llah is, "Know then that he who uttered these words in the realms of glory meant to describe the attributes of the one who is to come in such veiled and enigmatic terms as to elude the understanding of the people of error." So it's just him saying, like, there's going to be figure of speech. There's going to be a lot of metaphor in it.
Okay. So it's interesting because I've now heard a phrase in quotes that I've not heard before, which is the people of error. Is that a phrase that he uses often, or?
I don't know if it's used often. I mean, I'd have to. There's a lot more in the. It's a lot more focus in the Baha'i faith and scriptures to focus on encouraging people to do good rather than denounce them as doing wrong.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure
where it goes is terms of it's written in a way, because what it sounds like is it's written in a way that will guide the people, but not people of error. Which, I mean, doesn't really sound like basically everything else that we've heard about the faith, which is why I'm asking about it, because it seems like I may have misinterpreted
so we may have
that.
to go into like another tangent here.
Okay, so that might be
a quick side note on this. So there are other references where there are people who lack the capacity to let those who have ears let them hear. It's talking about spiritual insight. Let those with eyes let them see. And so it's more of like how developed your spirit is, and we all develop anyway, and you can leave error. So it's more like, I guess it'd be more like a stage of a person's personal development.
Okay. So it's
that's the best understanding I can give at the moment.
Okay. Okay, interesting. All right, so sorry. It didn't mean to derail your point that much, but can you return to the step 2, I think it was?
We just went over step 2 as being figurative, not literal. Let's see. Step 3.
Is that separate from step 1? Because I thought...
I'm just going based off of what the author has put down on here.
So let me tell you what I've heard real quick, because step 1 seemed like some things will be metaphorical, and he gives the example of like, fire
out of his
feet
eyes,
of bronze, and like,
and the sword coming out of his mouth.
That can't possibly be literal, guys. But in his flowery language, right?
Right. That's me. To also give specifics, these quotes, like, I haven't read through the Gems of Divine Mysteries book yet, but it says the first one's from page 52. The second one I read was from page 53. So it looks like the author of this hasn't, he's not just going to like put the whole book on here. He's put in so there's probably more context around the specific quotes, because he clearly does not have a full page for each one on here.
It's a summary.
Right.
Yeah. So it seems like the first step is step 1, not everything is literal. Right. And then step 2, make sure you understand the context of the metaphor.
Right.
Right. Okay. Because it said something about the specific language in which it's said, which I hate to bring up Christianity all the time because we're talking about Baha'i, but that's one of the things where I'm sort of skeptical about sort of the lay person online that goes, oh my gosh, I've been reading a modern English version of the Bible, and this specific English word means this. And I'm like, okay, there are literally Bible colleges that teach the dead languages that this was written in so that people can interpret it. But that appears to be something that these steps are warning about.
Right.
Right. Okay. I guess I didn't leave you anything for that. Yeah. Okay. So what's the third step?
All right. So the author writes here, for step 3, when we try to identify the qualities conveyed by the figurative language, we could simply add, okay. So he's still talking about like the whole, like he's using the flames of fire as like his
example.
Focus. Okay. What qualities could flames of fire represent? Here, Baha'u'llah does just that. See, now when he saith his eyes were as a flame of fire, he alludeth but to the keenness of sight and acuteness of vision of the promised one, who with his eyes burneth away every veil and covering, maketh known the eternal mysteries in the contingent world, and distinguisheth the faces that are obscured with the dust of hell from those that shine with the light of paradise. Just a quick side note, we already went over like hell, not like a little place where you burn for all eternity in the Baha'i faith.
But like a
distance from God kind of situation. Yeah, go back to the quote.
Mm-hmm.
Were his eyes not made of the blazing fire of God, how could he consume every veil and burn away all that the people possess? How could he behold the signs of God in the kingdom of his names and in the world of creation? How could he see all things with the all-perceiving eye of God? For indeed, what fire is fiercer than this flame that shineth in the Sinai of his eyes, whereby he consumeth all that hath veiled the peoples of the world? I know it's a lot of... it's very wordy.
It's very wordy, but okay. So I'm actually not sort of seeing what point he's coming to there in terms of step 3, because it seems like he's saying
it's about. Well, we go back to the author's quick paragraph right before that about identifying the qualities conveyed by the language.
Okay, identifying the specific, like, what's relevant in this, right?
Right.
Like
Like
if it's a metaphor, how should we go about determining which parts of the metaphor are the most specific ones? Something like that?
it just says identifying the qualities conveyed by the figurative language.
Okay.
So I guess it's more of like just an encouragement to like actually sit and think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Is what I'm getting from it.
Okay. So identify the
Like
things that it's trying to say.
ask, question it, like to come up whatever. Try and think of like what it could possibly mean in a more realistic sense.
Okay. So if that's step 3, then where are we on step 4?
Let's see. So back to the author. As for step 4, when we try to determine the spiritual event the prophecy alludes to, Baha'u'llah hints of, but does not openly disclose the spiritual event, the advent of Baha'u'llah himself, in fulfillment of these very prophecies of the book of Revelation. And he just like doesn't refer to Jesus. Let's see. Okay, quote, a few quotes. No, wait. Is that from... I'm trying to keep this in. Okay, I think he's going into Revelations now. Like something. In fact, we know this prophecy cannot refer to Jesus Christ, at least in name, for Revelations 19:12 reads in full, "His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. To him that overcometh will I give a white stone." Oh, wait, this is going to a different part of Revelations. This is the new name previously referred to in Revelations 2:17 and 3:12. "To him that overcometh will I give a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saying he that receiveth it." You know, basically, all three of them could kind of say the same thing. I don't know if I really went.
So what is that? What does that mean in terms of like step 4?
Okay, I kind of skipped over this earlier part where where the author specifically outlines all four of them in a short sentence.
Okay, well, so here then.
Let's do a quick recap.
We'll end up probably cutting this part to the beginning, maybe. So 4 principles of interpretation of, I suppose, prophecy and metaphor, and there's a summary from the author at the beginning. Let's go through those.
Right. So each 4 of them, the first one, if impossible, then not literal. Mm-hmm. The second one, if not literal, then figurative. Third one, if figurative, then symbolic. Mm-hmm. And the fourth one, if symbolic, then spiritual and social.
Okay. That's a pretty good summary. And then he gives an example of how to put these 4 steps sort of together. Like, oh, hey, this is impossible, so it is a metaphor. If it's, the second one is if it's
not literal, then figurative.
Not literal, then figurative. Okay. And then if figurative, symbolic. So it's identify the symbols in part 3, like we were talking about. Mm-hmm. And then part 4 is
if symbolic, then spiritual and social.
Okay. So if there are symbols, then they're saying something, sort of. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Has this author gone through various other prophecies and then it?
Oh yeah, this is like the baseline he has set up for the series as a whole, because I think this is like very early on in the beginning of the series, mm-hmm. and like there's just a lot more from multiple religions, and he'll spend like a whole short article on just like one prophecy for each one, maybe, mm-hmm. or just do like a couple of articles on it. And that was just some background on how this particular article series goes forward on it.
But is that guidance consistent with the way that Baha'i, as a faith, teaches that prophecy should be interpreted?
I'm not exactly familiar with the word for word. I mean, he is going based off of what the Baha'i faith, or what he sees as coming from the Baha'i faith.
Okay. But he's not pulling this out of his butt, right? Like this is him going, oh, okay, this is how as Baha'i you would look at
as best of an understanding he can come up with from the writings that are available.
Okay, well that's cool.
All right, so that was for that, and now we can get into
some specifics. I think this is a good introductory segment, and I think it's a good snappy one. And so if you will join us next time, we'll be covering more specific things, but don't go away yet. First, let me thank you, Connor, for joining us again, a resident theist and Baha'i extraordinaire. I've been Jamie Boone, and this has been a production. This has been one of the Atheist Interview series produced by the Atheist Experience Network, which is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, which produces many other excellent shows. I'm sure they are referenced in the description of this video. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope you come by again.